ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how. Hey there, Matt Petrowski here for FileMaker Magazine. We are going to be taking a look at FileMaker's hide object when calculation and see what we can do with it. Alright, so here we are on my desktop. Thanks for joining me. I've got a couple files that we can see right here, and we are going to take a look at FileMaker's hide object when. It is tied into FileMaker's calculation engine, and right off the bat, here is a contacts file that we'll be looking at. You can follow along. This contacts file, when I go into find mode, which I'm doing right now with Command F, you really didn't notice any changes. In fact, FileMaker has a query by form method, meaning whatever the fields are on the layout, that's how you're going to search. So if I wanted to search for a phone fax, I literally have to click on the tab here, or if I wanted to search for the email in this particular design, I have to go literally to the tab. Now that's not very convenient, because when I go into find mode, I just like it to show me what fields I can actually see. Over here, I've got a modified version. I go into find mode. Look at the changes that we have there. We have changed the actual banner here to tell us we're in find mode, and all of the tabs are gone, and I'm actually looking right at the fields that I can search. So this is what we're going to be taking a look at in the remainder of this video. How can we use FileMaker's hide calculation when, not just to do this, but to do pretty much anything we would want to do with our user interface with regards to using this one feature of FileMaker. All right, so let's start off with something that you can use if you want to follow along in this video. If you want to go up to the File menu, I am in a copy of FileMaker 19 as of the recording of this video, and you can choose this option, Create New. When you do, the window will come up, and this is the file that I am working off of, the contacts. Now, that's in FileMaker 19, but essentially it really doesn't matter what file you have. You will be able to learn from this video and take away FileMaker's hide object when. Now, first off, where can you find it? We go into layout mode. I'm using Command L or Control L if you're on Windows, and it is here in this fourth area, what they call the Data tab. Now, if the inspector is not showing, then you're going to be able to go up to the View menu in order to turn that inspector on or not. It is right down here under Inspectors, and you can see we've got Command I here. In fact, in FileMaker, you can actually create a new inspector which will be detached from the window if you don't want to use the built-in inspector. As I bring that one up, this is old school FileMaker. I'll hit Command I right here. It'll take the inspector off. We have the same thing floating right here, and we're able to do that. It provides you with a little bit of a benefit if you like to design things without the window shrinking and zooming, but that's what FileMaker does. We'll go ahead and show that inspector again and just work off the one that is attached. The Data tab right here has it under the Behavior. So the Behavior area, it is hide object when. Now this one calculation can do amazing tons of different things in your FileMaker user interface. The most simplest thing to do is simply put in a true. And let's go ahead and take a look at that. Here's a great little tip that I have used a long time, and I am going to I'll actually select the text tool, and then I'll drag out a little text tool right here, and I say, this is a developer note. And then I could go over to the tab right here, and I could give it a fill, make it look like it's an actual note right here. We'll just pick an orange really quickly. I'll turn on a top line. In fact, some people who saw this, I've been doing this for a long time, thought, oh my gosh, FileMaker has notes? No, you just fake it and make it look like a note. We'll select a darker color right there and sort of make that look a little bit like it's a sticky note. Now, what's cool about this is I can put this on the screen if I need to remember to design something. Let's say right here, I want to say fix this and give myself a bunch of little indicators. Now, I don't want this to show up in my UI when a user is using this, and users will typically not have access to layout mode, or I'm typically not allowing people to just come in and move things arbitrarily. If you are, then hey, good luck with your database. We will select this, and we will go over to that Data tab, and we will just say hide object when. I can just type in true. Now, true for me is a habit, but you can use 1 versus 0, which is true versus false. But I just like to see things in their true versus false state, I go into browse mode and the note is not there, meaning it will be there for me when I am developing. So that is the most fundamental way of using FileMaker's hide calculation when. It is just a true statement to that hide calculation. Now we can always see that a hide calculation either is or is not on certain objects by virtue of this little indicator right here, the eye icon. If it's not showing on your copy of FileMaker, you're going to find that under the View menu, and you're going to go to Show, and then we are going to say, I need to scroll out here a little bit. There we go. Right there, hide calculation. You can see that mine is checked so that I can see when objects are going to be hidden. If this is unchecked, you will not see that little eye icon right there. And we want to make sure that we turn that on. So we can now. All right, so let's move on to something that is a little more useful and a little bit more complex. Okay, so what is a little bit more useful in the UI? That is to show state or status of things. Now, in this UI, it's a little bit bland. It's just straightforward, but we typically want to provide users with an indicator of whether something is in an okay state or a not okay state. So I'm going to go into layout mode here. I will select my text tool again and drag out a box, and I'll put in the word completed. I'm going to go over and I'm going to align this. I'm going to center it both horizontally and vertically. I will then select, drag this up a little bit more. Let's give it some nice corner radius of 5. I'm going to set the fill to a solid color, and I'm going to select a nice red, and then I'll change the text color to a white. Now, this is a very nice indicator. In fact, we will align this with this box right here. And I am also going to anchor this. We're going to select on the first tab right here, and I'm going to select the completed, and I want to choose my anchor options, turn them off at the top. Well, I could leave the top on. The top and the right instead of the left. So it will stay over on this edge right here. So we go into browse mode, and completed is now showing. Now, I can always do the inverse of whatever I'm going to put on screen, and we'll take a look at that, but I only want this to show when I have completed all of the things that are necessary within this user interface. It gives the user a nice warm fuzzy feeling to know that they have done the job that they're supposed to do. Now, this is the situation in all kinds of database systems. So all we're going to do is we're going to go to that hide calculation, click on the little icon, which will bring up FileMaker's calculation engine, and we can now put in to our heart's content whatever type of logic we want to put in. So let's start off with, let's say the first name and the last name needs to be filled. FileMaker has a nice convenient function that is called isEmpty, and we're going to then select the first name. Now we can inverse this by simply sticking a not in front of it. So if it is not empty, the first name, then this calculation will not be valid. So one of the issues that a newer beginning FileMaker developer will come into is logic and how to actually combine a lot of things. So FileMaker has these functions, these operators of and then they also have or. Now it gets a little bit confusing when to use them, but if you fumble your way through, eventually you end up with the result that you want. But we're going to look at the variety of ways that we could format this. We could say, and then we can just copy this top thing and put this, and then put the last name. Well, let's just select the whole fully qualified name and say last name. So what we're saying now is, if the first name is not empty and the last name is not empty, then we are going to result in a true value. So we're going to go into browse mode. Our completed is still there, but that means our logic is not in the right order. It's not, we need to flip things around or play with things, and we're going to do that. So I'm going to put something in here. Actually, we'll create a new record. I did not have a new record yet, and we'll put in Matt and Petrowski, and then we'll click, and we'll see that the button goes away. So we want what we have right now was actually the direction that I probably would go. I would go with this and say, just change the word. This is what I love about incomplete, incomplete, and we'll put that right there, incomplete. All right, so This is the logic that I would probably put into this. This record, I've got this nice red warning that says this is incomplete until I actually get the first name and the last name in here. That's my rules. So now I've got my first name and my last name. Now, if I required the phone number, or at least one phone number, and at least one email, and at least one address, the calculation, as you can see, can get pretty complex, because now what you're doing is you're looking for a lot of different things. So if you're new to FileMaker, I understand how this stuff can be really confusing, but let's look at a few of the options that we can do with logic and discover how there's not just one way to use FileMaker's calculation engine. All right, so we'll go back into this, and we need to think, what is another way that we could do this? And this is what's great about learning FileMaker and about learning logic and how you can do things. So this is just one of many ways that we can make this calculation work. But the problem is it gets very convoluted, because we end up with and we have all of these different rules right here where we're trying to watch a bunch of different fields. Let's say this one was the phone number, and let's say this one was then an email address. But of course, because we're going across the portal, we could have 3 or 5 email addresses, but we only need to identify that we have one email address. Well, we need to solve this in a way that makes it easier for us. Now, we can do things with our logic, so I want you to follow me with this. All the way back in basic math, when we were learning things, and we had 2 plus 2 times 6. We learned there was an order of operations, and that order of operations was this. The multiplication had to happen before the addition, so you had to multiply 2 times 6 before you added the plus 2. Well, the same thing works with FileMaker's calculation engine. So what we can do is we can take this right here and say is empty contacts and is empty, and then put the last name. And then what we can do is we can actually wrap these within parentheses. We can group that expression, and this not on the outside of it will flip that whole expression. Now, ideally, that's not the solution for this particular situation if we want to watch for multiple things and make it really easy on ourselves, but we have to remember that there's always more than one way to solve a problem. So let's go ahead and just take a look at what this does by going into browse mode. We've got our values right there. Let's go ahead and just inverse that by simply taking off the not and see what happens. So we'll take the not off, and then we'll go right there, and we can see we have the incomplete. So here's what I'm trying to say about your hide calculations. Even though they can get pretty complex, you can play with them and ultimately end up with the result that you want. You don't have to get it right the first time. You just work on it until you get the result that works the way that you want. It's also a great way to discover things in FileMaker. So now let's take a look at another way that we could do this. We will select this. If you have multiple things that you want to account for in a hide calculation, or in any FileMaker calculation for that matter, FileMaker has some functions that are pretty useful that will bunch things together. So one of those in particular is this function called list. Now, list gathers up a bunch of things, and then you're able to use whatever the result of those things are and do something with it. So with the list function, what I can do is, this is just yet another way to solve this problem. I'll put in a tab here, and I will say first name, and I'll put a semicolon, and then I'll put a tab right there, and I'll put another semicolon. If you haven't put tabs in FileMaker's calculation engine, by the way, on the Macintosh, it is Option tab in order to inject a tab. Otherwise, the tab moves around to the different aspects of the UI. So Option tab on Mac, and on Windows it'll be, I forget, it might be Alt or Shift tab. Something to get this literal indent in here because it makes it a little bit easier. So what we can do with this is going to gather the first name and the last name, and it grabs them together. Well, what I can do is I can now apply some logic to that. So with that all selected, I'm going to cut that with Command or Control X, and now I'm going to say is empty that result. So as I add some returns here, I will put that in, and let's go ahead and put in some indents again. Again, readable code is really, really helpful when you have a very large FileMaker solution. So what we're saying now is I want you to grab a list of these values. It is the first name, it is the last name, and then I want to know if that's empty or if it's not empty, because all we have to do to reverse the logic is put that not right in front of it right there. So with this, can I add in the phone number and the email address? Well, I can, but we have to remember that we're going across a portal. So that portal is the email for the email addresses and the phone number for the phone numbers. Now we can use a separate list on those. So we're going to do list, and then we are going to look at the phone numbers, and then we actually have the number right here. We don't care about the type. Let's go ahead and get a list of the phone numbers. And we have to think, what do we want? Do we want to require one phone number? Do we want to require there is at least, at least one, or do they need to have at least two, a work and a mobile? All of that comes down to how you're going to evaluate this logic. Now, if there are phone numbers in there, let's go ahead and put in a couple fake ones, 800, 1212, and then we'll just do another one of 801. So this list function will return however many numbers come back. If only one number comes back, we will only get one number. If two numbers come back, then we have something. Otherwise, if nothing comes back, then we have what's an empty result. So that empty result, as I undo that accidental deletion right there, is something that we want to add into this. Well, because we're going across the relationship, we have to use this separate list. I don't believe that we could merge these in. I haven't actually tried, but you definitely can. I could have just put this in here and just see if this would work and test that out. I'd be fine doing that. But from having been a FileMaker developer for a long time, I know that when you go across a relationship to another portal, usually it's best to use its own list function. And what's nice about that as well is if I wanted to go based on a count, I would be able to do something like this. Value count is a function where I can say, I've got a list of numbers, give me a value count of that. And then I can say something like is equal to 0 if I'm testing for no numbers, or is greater than or equals to, which you can put in this format. That's the option greater than, less than sign. Or you can do the greater than equals to. You can do that in FileMaker as well. So I'm just going to do the way that I'm used to. So at least we have one or more. So first off, this cannot be empty. And we can say, and we have across the list of the phone numbers a value count that is greater than or equal to 1. So what we're saying right now, let's check our logic right here. This will hide if is empty. I believe I may put not, but I'm not even going to test it right there. I could spend the time to think about the logic and go through it, but I'm going to show you this is how I can work things out. So incomplete, let's go over it. Let's add a phone number. 800-1212, and then let's click, and there we go. My incomplete did not go away, but my criteria should be satisfied. And since I'm doing this real time, those of you that are watching this that are intermediate or advanced are probably saying, oh, it's this, Matt. Well, I just proved my point. Just work the logic until you test things out and it works the way that you want. So what we have right now is we've got a somewhat simple solution using the hide calculation, but the hide FileMaker object when does not stop right there. You can hide anything in FileMaker, and the example that we're going to go through next is the one that shows us where we can account for modes and anything in the environment that we might want to. All right, so let's dig in and do a little bit more with FileMaker's hide object when. We can take advantage of anything that is in FileMaker that is a change. So what we're looking at here is we go into find mode. I'm hitting Command F or Control F. Now we can see right here when I've gone into find mode, we've got some things that are showing right here. We've got my developer note is actually showing and my incomplete is showing. those really have nothing to do with FileMaker's find mode. So we're going to go back into layout mode here, and we are going to select these. Actually, let's go ahead and fix it over on my modified version. Let's get rid of that one, and we'll work with this one right here, because when we go into find mode, we've got the same situation. We've got the button showing up, which has nothing to do with find mode, but we've got a complete change on things. So we'll go into layout mode, and the easiest way to fix this, and on this version I have my developer note off, but let's go ahead and put it back on. Let's go into find mode with Command F. That's a no-no. We don't want that. So this is the easiest solution of all, and it's right there in our face. It is simply that right there. Apply in find mode. Now, the great thing about this option is that we can hide things that are specific to find mode. In fact, I'm taking advantage of it right now. So as I go to my incomplete or my badge status of the whole of the record, we can see that I have this right here, this search mode. Now, this is one of the best things to do when you are going to walk the user or give them a big change in the UI, meaning you're going from browse mode to find mode. And FileMaker had this very common problem prior to having things such as the placeholder text, which we have right here, where the placeholder, when you're in browse mode and there is no value, or you're in find mode, this tells you what should be in that field without actually having to have the label. Well, prior to that, FileMaker didn't show you anything about going into find mode. So in find mode, because FileMaker uses query by form, when we go into find mode, FileMaker now adds these little magnifying glasses. FileMaker did not used to do that. In fact, it just took you in. It did not have any placeholder text. It did not have these magnifying glasses. And FileMaker had a very common problem, which was quite funny, that FileMaker would basically have people enter data into find mode. And so they had to come up with a solution that was pretty funny, that if you created more than a few requests, I think it was, I forget, it might be like 10, but you can see it today. If I go Command in, I'm in find mode. I can see that because I've got find mode buttons here. Let's see if FileMaker does it. I'm going to do Command in, and see if FileMaker does this once I get to, there we go. FileMaker had to solve this problem that people would go into find mode. You couldn't tell you were in find mode, and they would throw up this dialog right here. You were in find mode and appear to be entering new criteria, because they knew that most users typically would never enter 10 different records. And that was pretty funny. That was actually quite hilarious, that users would be in find mode and it looked so similar to their browse mode that they were actually entering data. And what happened as soon as they go into browse mode? All the 10 records that they entered were blasted. They were gone. So we are going to take this opportunity to use FileMaker's hide calculation and show a completely different find mode. When you notice when I go into find mode, we are now able to see this is completely different. Normally, find mode would keep me in this look, and I would have to switch to each of these different tabs. So how did I solve this? This is one of the key things that we need to know about find mode. Well, it's actually find mode and the fact of how FileMaker works. Heading back into layout mode, we do need to actually get rid of this. This has nothing to do with find mode, so we need to modify this now so that it doesn't even show in find mode. That's going to introduce us to one of our environment functions. Now, all of FileMaker's get functions, which I'll show over here, and we will go down and we will expand all of the get functions. All of these functions, of which there's a super long list, become familiar with these. In fact, just spend the short amount of time that it takes, if you're not already familiar, and just scroll through this list. Account name, account type, the field name, the modifier key. If something doesn't sound familiar or it doesn't make sense, go look it up in the help. And I guarantee you that becoming familiar with all of FileMaker's environment functions will make you a better FileMaker developer, because now you can take advantage of what happens when something is different in the environment. So I won't go through all of these. No way can I do that. But we need to modify this calculation and say, what's going to happen if we're in find mode? Well, one of these, as we scroll all the way down to the bottom, is get window mode right there. Now we're going to learn about how you can take advantage of a particular environment function. They don't all work the same, but there's a very easy way that FileMaker's made it for us, but it's not super obvious. So I'm going to go over to, let's see, I think I've got the help loaded, and I do right here, FileMaker's help. And I'm going to put in window mode and search for that function right here. Get window mode, it is right there. All right, this is a very key lesson when it comes to FileMaker functions. This appeared in FileMaker 6, and for a lot of FileMaker functions, the way that they return a result is they return a result starting with a zero-based answer and then just increase in numbers, giving you a sequence of options. The way that Boolean logic works in FileMaker is this. If it is anything other than 0, then it is true. If it is 0 or literally false, then it is false. So what we can see is browse mode is the default mode. Any other mode is considered sort of like true. So if they go into find mode, it would be true. If they go into preview mode, it would be true. If they're printing or if they're evaluating something in the data viewer, which is really only during development, then it's true. So we're really only worried about these three primarily because find and preview are the other two modes that a user can go into. So we're going to say something to the effect of, we do not want to see this particular incomplete when we're in a find mode. So we're going to put in get window mode. And then here we could go and say if the window mode is equal to and give it a number, but we don't actually have to do that. We can just say if the get window mode, and if it returns anything other than a 0, then that is a true. So if I did this, let's see if this will work, and I will group this, and I'm going to put a parenthesis here, and then a parenthesis there. Remember, it's our order of operation. So by putting these parentheses, I'm grouping this whole logic. And I'm saying, if it is get window mode, meaning if it's positive right now, if it's anything other than browse, and I might want to say, I might want to get specific here. I want to hide this when get window mode is equal to, well, I can say does not equal 0. This, see how complex this can get really quickly? You can flip the logic of your operator. So rather than saying if it equals 1, and then I could also say, well, it also could equal 2, meaning they could go into preview mode. Well, the opposite would be as long as it's not 0, and that covers all of your conditions for 1 and 2. Boy, I didn't intend for this to be a complex calculation type video, but all of this applies when you're doing complex hide calculations. So let's see if this actually works. We'll go into browse mode. We'll go into find mode. Hey, the incomplete, which didn't apply to find mode, is no longer there. And when we go back into browse mode, let's break our condition. Let's take out a name and see if it still triggers. Ah, we have a problem with our logic. We would need to go in and fix that. I probably shouldn't take the time to do it here on screen live. I can fix this once I figure it out. Let's see if it just works with the and right there. Let's see if that works right there. And then we'll put in match. And it's not going away. I'm going to have to put in my logic right there. This is actually a great opportunity for you to pause the video on that hide calculation and figure this out for yourself, because honestly, doing this real time while I'm recording, it's a little bit difficult, and many times it just takes a little while to think about how things should work. But I want to move on with this video. I can get that for sure. I know I can. We will make that happen. How did we do the search mode? Well, right here, like I've already shown you, we can say get window mode, and we can say not. Now what this does is this is the logic that this is following. So if we said if get window mode equals 0, that would be meaning you're in browse mode. If we said it does not equal 0, then that means it is any other mode except for browse mode, which is perfect. We would want this to show up in a particular mode. In this case, I should be pretty specific. I shouldn't do something like this because I don't want a thing that is saying search mode to actually come up in preview mode. So I would probably say I really only want to hide this when the mode does not equal, and I would probably say 1. This is probably the best way to do this rather than what I had, because what I was saying by using the not is I was saying this will show in any other mode except for browse, which means it would show in preview mode. And we can test that. Let's go ahead and see right here. This is what I love about FileMaker. Playing around helps you become a better developer. So if I go into find mode, it shows my search mode banner. Let's see what happens when I go into preview mode. See, I don't want that. I need to modify my logic. So we're going to go back into layout mode, and we're going to make our logic more explicit now. So I'm not going to use that not, meaning any other mode than browse. I'm going to say as long as it does not equal find mode, you are going to not show, or you're going to hide. So we'll go into browse mode. It does not show. We'll go into preview mode. It does not show. We'll go into find mode, and there it is. That is exactly what I want to do. And through the process of working your logic, you end up with the solution that you want. So we've got one final tip when it comes to hiding and showing things and using this hide object when calculation. It is this. We must remember that FileMaker has a couple of layout objects which are considered containers, meaning they contain other objects. So what I have here on screen is I have, as I scroll that off to the side, I have a situation where I have a tab panel, and I would like to make it easier for the user to search, meaning I am just going to give them this company field from this, the website, the phone, this number, an email, this right here. Even though these are related fields, I can have them outside of a portal and still be able to search on those related fields, and they will come up looking across the relationship for those records. But this is really convoluted. FileMaker's query by form, I don't want to use this. I want to use a method that has all of the fields, as we can see right here. Now the trick is, within FileMaker, I could take the time and I could have selected each individual field, and I could have gone to the hide object when and added that calculation. The problem is I don't want a bunch of different calculations, because the more calculations I have to manage for some feature, that's just more than I have to go and modify and change. And by the way, I will give you a tip. It is much easier if you're going to use the hide calculation and do it on multiple objects. Because you have to do it that way, it is much easier to use a custom function to do that and then modify the code in one place rather than having to go onto each individual object and modify that. You can put context-specific code in a FileMaker custom function, it is a singular place to modify code. But when it comes to this, knowing that FileMaker's tab panels, slide controls, portals, and popovers are all containers. We can always see that when we go to the Objects tab and we look at the fact that with a tab control selected, we can quite easily see that that tab control contains other objects as we select them. So we can take advantage of FileMaker's hide calculation, and if there's a bunch of things that we want to hide at one time, we are going to put that on the container object and just make sure that that container object is not contained by another object. So what do I mean by that? Well, this tab control right here would normally contain objects. We can see that because this particular pane contains these objects. When I switch to a pane, those objects I was looking at in the company tab are not contained by this tab, they're contained by this tab. Pretty obvious. So in order to accomplish this, I put a hide calculation onto a slide panel which I made transparent. And by doing that, anything that's contained within that slide panel becomes hidden itself, because you can't show the things that are inside of an object that's containing it when that object is being hidden itself. So the only thing I had to make sure and do is make sure that everything in this slide panel is actually outside of the boundaries of the tab panel. So this slider is wider than the tab panel. There's tricks that you can do as long as at least one edge is hanging outside of something. FileMaker will keep the containment separate. As we can see, I've got this slider. It is overlaid on top of the tab panel. If you don't like that, you can definitely send this to the back. But if we look at the hide calculation, this one again, it was the method that I was using, meaning only show this in any mode other than browse mode. But I'm going to modify this. I'm going to say if it's any mode other than 1, then I do not want to see that tab panel. When I go into find mode, there is the result of what I'm looking for. I still need to fix that up, but that's the lesson I'm going to leave for you. You can look through that logic and fix that. But now I have a find mode that looks completely different than my browse mode. When I go into it, I can see that I'm in search mode. I can see what fields I am going to be able to search. I can provide the user with a nice note, just like I did with the status of the incomplete versus complete. I even took the opportunity to say, you know what? Users can't search on a container field, so it doesn't even make sense to show it. So I hid that one as well using the same logic. Right here, I said hide that object when, get window mode, and of course you can modify this to whatever's going to fit your particular needs. So that's what I have for this video. I hope you've learned more about using FileMaker's calculation engine, also how to use the hide object when and integrate whatever calculation logic you need. We did have a nice complex one which started to integrate many more fields using the combination of the list function and looking across, doing a count of things across a relationship. You can make these, again, as complex as you want, but what we have on screen for here is the lesson for you to figure out what is the logic or the switch that I need to make in order to make this work. Copy this from screen, put it into your own file, and figure out how to make that button go out or go away when it is in find mode using your operators of your ands and your ors and so forth. So, as always, I'd like to wish you much luck with your own FileMaker development, and until next time, happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.